Oh, yeah, we got to overturn.
You're listening to the E-Man, inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. E-Woman on tonight, actually. And it's funny, the beginning of that introduction that we have for the ESU miniseries, that's how I found out about Tom Rowe and Glenn Klein, who later came on the show. Tommy Rowe, who hasn't come on the show yet, was involved in a great rescue there on that MVA in 10 Trucks territory, which my guest tonight worked at over in Queens. That was back in 1994 when Cops filmed with the NYPD. And we welcome you back to episode 276. The Mike the New Haven podcast, volume 34 of the E-Cops inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. You haven't checked out the previous episode, volume 45 of the Best of the Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, featuring former FDNY Chief of Department Peter Hayden, who played a central role in helping the FDNY rebuild after the tragedy of 9/11. One sponsor to go through tonight, and that's the man, the myth, the legend, Billy Ryan, of course, who helped me create Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the Elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike to New Haven podcast. I'm smirking because Steve Stefanakis is in the chat. He's already putting comments in there, so I look forward to him contributing tonight. Of course, he worked with my next guest in 10 Truck, and my next guest may be 5'1", but throughout her 25 years as a New York City police officer, she demonstrated the heart and valor of a giant. She was a Bronx cop in the mid-'90s, and heart was certainly needed back then. And beginning as an officer in the 44th Precinct, she worked patrol and later vice, which she'll tell me about, before a 1998 transfer would see her enter the Emergency Service Unit, where she'd stay for the next 20 years, becoming a counter sniper along the way before she retired in 2018. And that, for this volume of the E-Cops, volume 34, inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, somebody I've been trying to get for a long time, finally did tonight, Tina Guerrero. Tina, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Mike. How are you today?
Good, good. Finally, great to have you. A lot of people already in the chat. I think this is Nikki Bavaro, if I'm not mistaken. It says LinkedIn user, but it's either Nikki Bavaro or Franco Barbario. So great to see you, one of you, at least in the chat, and everybody else tuning in as well. So before we get into the NYPD, tell me about where you grew up, Tina.
I actually grew up in Cambria Heights, Queens. I was born in Elmhurst, Queens, and lived in the Bronx on Beach Avenue for a very short period of time until my father bought a house in Cambria Heights. And for the most part, I grew up there, and then later on moving to Hollis, Queens.
Where did the interest in civil service, if at all, start for you?
Boy, I absolutely love being outdoors, and as a kid, I just enjoyed shows like Policewoman. Angie Dickinson was one of my most favorite characters growing up, along with Clint Eastwood, Charles Bronson, the Mod Squad. All those police shows that just, was something I enjoyed. I never thought I was going to become a cop. I originally took the ASVAB test to go into the Army, and then I wound up changing my mind. And later on worked for UPS, and then eventually got called for the police academy in '93.
Oh, well. Okay. So at least it's funny because my producer, Vic, he worked for UPS for a long time. So he's smirking in the back. Yeah. So you got that link there. And he worked in the Bronx for a while, too. Joe Guerrero's in the chat. So is John Latanzio. They both say hello. And Steve Stefanakis says, poor Angie Dickinson.
Steph belongs to the Truck 10 Peanut Gallery. I was expecting him. I got a text earlier this afternoon, and it started early. So
yes,
to know that he was going to be in the chat.
Oh yeah, I would have been shocked if he wasn't, to be honest with you. So you get on in '93, and of course this is right before the merger. Merger didn't happen until 2 years later in '95. You didn't get transit, you didn't get housing, you got the NYPD, and you started out in the Bronx. So tell me about getting into the Bronx. Because by this point there were no more NSUs, but you had an FTO. You started out in the 4-4. What was the makeup of the area at the time?
The crack era was still, very strong. The crime was up still. I actually, in the academy, they gave us three choices. Pick three precincts, and I picked my first choice was the 4-4, the 4-0, or the 4-6. And I guess they felt, all right, here's someone that wants to go to the Bronx and doesn't mind paying a toll. So here you have. But I got my first choice, and I was very happy at that.
And around this time, you're starting to see the decline, or at least more proactive activity being encouraged. Ray Kelly had started it, but Bratton comes in, and of course, the decline begins to really, really ascend in higher numbers. By the time he left in '96, crime was down 39%. And part of the reason, or a huge part of the reason because of that, was the work you guys were putting in. So tell me about learning from senior officers, either indirectly or directly, and how to work those streets in the South Bronx.
I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, during when I was younger, I actually you would visit family on Girard Avenue in the confines of the 4-4. So I knew a little bit about the area, but I never thought that I would ever be a cop working in that area. When I first got there, you don't know much, even though you have somewhat of a wise attitude. But I learned a lot from the men and women there. There was no time to sit and worry about White Sox and anything like that, or your nails or anything like that. I wasn't into all that stuff. But they put us out there right away. I was they put us up on Webster Avenue my first day out with my girlfriend, Evelyn Carlo, both of us by ourselves on a foot post. And the rest was history. You learn very quickly, and a lot of the times the senior guys sometimes would pick us up off a foot post, and you jump in the back seat and you listen to how they operated, and or they get you out doing car stops and handling other jobs, and you learn, like I said, you learn very quickly. It was a very fast pace in the Bronx, and I enjoyed it very much.
I can imagine. I can imagine. We're talking with Tina Guerrero. This is volume 34 of the E-Cops inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. Shout out to Tom Smith, who'll be on the show soon, retired detective out of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And Rick Martinez says hello. He says the 4-4 was my first command, 4-4 forever. Indeed, Rick. He worked in Truck 3 during his time in ESU. Great guy. He's been on the show previously. Do you recall your first arrest?
Yes. Actually, it was 3 red top vials of crack.
Good bust.
My first arrest that one of the senior officers actually helped me process it, and it was a pregnant female, three red vials of crack.
Not good.
On the west side of the precinct.
Yeah. So you're seeing this early on, and it's tough sights to see. You got to keep a cool head. You got to keep a level head. It's not easy to see something like that. Here's a pregnant woman, no less, who's using crack. So tell me about staying centered and not letting, bad sights like that get to you.
Well, when you become a cop, you have to learn to be very thick-skinned and not take anything personal. You have to leave it when you go home. You leave it at work, and that's it. You don't take it home with you. You see a lot of terrible things. You'll get a lot of jobs that you'll leave with a smile on your face, and just be happy that you were able to help someone get through a tough time. Or whether it's an injury or violent crime, but you get through it, and you just try to stay strong and not let a lot of these things get under your skin.
Right. No, of course, it's not easy, but you have to, because otherwise, you bring it home, and that kind of starts a downward spiral for a lot of guys. But, it's good to have that thick skin and good to create that emotional separation. So around 96, by this point, you got a few years in the job. You've honed your skills in patrol. The opportunity for vice comes up. So tell me about the opportunity first, and then starting out in a unit like that.
Well, it actually started in the 4-4. At one point, there was a big problem with prostitution down by Bronx Terminal Market and other areas in the city. The precinct was doing it at a precinct level initiative, and I was asked, along with a couple other girls in the 4-4, to do what they call Operation Losing Proposition. So we would get up, we'd get into our little get ups, and we'd go down to Bronx Terminal Market and basically get the girls out of there that were there and stay there for the night and basically pick up the Johns that were out there and the rest, take it from there. We were doing it a lot. We were getting a lot of progress out of it. And later on, the opportunity came up for me to go to Bronx Vice, which turned out a PSA 7 off of Melrose Avenue. And I was asked to go on a temporary basis. So I thought it would be fun. I thought it'd be a nice little challenge. It wasn't just undercover pros. It was other stuff, illegal gambling, liquor licenses, things like that, untaxed cigarettes. So I went, and I was able to learn a lot and do a lot of stuff, not just in the Bronx, sometimes in Manhattan, Queens, and other boroughs. There were other young ladies in Bronx Vice at the time. One of the things I was told, when I first came to the job, don't volunteer for a lot of stuff. But me volunteering actually helped my career. And I volunteered all the time. And sometimes after I volunteered for some of these things, I had to think about what I did. And a few of the jobs that I had to do in Bronx Vice were somewhat hairy. At one point, other than doing it in Bronx Terminal Market, was down at Hunts Point, a few different areas up in Manhattan, until I got a phone call from a gentleman, a detective by the name of Sammy DeFiglia, who worked out at a 110. And they had a case going on which involved a prostitution ring. And what I had to do was actually go into a maximum security prison as an undercover call girl. So they asked me if I would do it. The person that they were looking to get before he was actually he was getting out and on parole. So they wanted to see what was going on, if there was still something going on outside while he was on the inside. So I had to do an interview with the madam, and I wound up going up to a maximum security prison upstate New York to be interviewed by this person. And I was in there for about an hour, a little over an hour as an undercover, and with no protection. And some things happened while I was in there, but I wound up getting the necessary information that I needed and leaving there safely. It was a challenge. It was very interesting. And once I got out of there, we came back to the city, and we continued, on other jobs, along the way. And as time went on, later on, in March of '98 is when I just a little before I went back to just before ESU, I wound up going back to the 4-4, and then I got called for ESU.
Last note on that chapter of your career before I get into the emergency years. As an undercover, and I've asked this question to undercovers that have been on the show prior, you have to have credibility, especially for some of the guys that have been around the block a while. They know a cop when they see one. So for you, what was the key to making sure they didn't sniff you out and say, yeah, she's a cop?
Get-ups, costumes that, things that I wore, lingo, the way I spoke, there's different, choices of words that you have to refrain from using that, people would pick up on the fact that you're a cop. There was areas where I was really like a dirty, prostitute. And then there was areas where I had to be a little bit more of a high class, prostitute. So, you had to, fit the part and just avoid, you had to make it so that you didn't say anything that in some sort of way, your mannerisms especially, with people, because they are very smart. They'll drive around and they'll watch to see what's going on before they make any kind of move towards you.
Of course.
But yeah, you'd be very surprised at what goes on. Very surprised.
Oh man, I will say, and I'm not trying to be funny when I say this, and nor am I going to go into great detail because it's a family-friendly show. But for those of you guys out there that, if you're at a point in your life where you have to pay for something like that, take a look in the mirror and try to get your life together because you're not
Yeah.
exactly in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that goes without saying. Vinnie Manco's in the chat. Hi, Vinnie. I haven't forgotten about you. I'm going to get you on the show soon, pal. I got to figure out a date for us to have our conversation when he says hello. So here's 1998. And by this point, you got 5 years on. You get into emergency. Before I get to Ford Truck, which is where you started, there's the STS. Tell me about that. I think it was 6 months back then, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was
So
about
tell me
6.
about those 6 months, half a year learning how to be an E-woman.
Well, actually, what actually happened was a little interesting. The class was called in February, and I wasn't on the list to get in.
Mhm.
I was supposed to get in. I wasn't on it, and while being back at the 4-4, and there's certain people that saw me and was wondering why I wasn't in the class. So phone calls were made, and comes March, like maybe 3 weeks in, I wind up in the class, and it was pretty interesting the looks that I got when I arrived there, because I did arrive 3 weeks late into the class. So I wound up, getting involved in all the training, and focusing on what I had to do, because once you're there, no matter how you get there, it's on you now. And I didn't think at any point in time in my life I really had to prove anything to anybody until I did get to ESU. You're dealing with a unit that for years was predominantly male dominated. When I got into ESU, I believe there was only 6 women. You had Maddie Lawrence, Harriet Stevenson, Sue Techie, um, Sue Scott, Anita Rosado, Regina McGee,
Yep.
whom we recently lost Regina to 9/11 illness, and then myself that had recently had come in. So I knew at that point, not only did I have to prove to the men in the unit and the bosses, and for those that got me there, I had a job to do, and that was to prove to them that this is something that I wanted to do. ESU is not a unit that a lot of women put in for. There's no one that can ever say anything about the unit that they don't take women, that it's that there's not a lot of women that put in for it. You have to really want to do this job. It's not something that you can go and worry about your hair, your fingernails, or there's a as a woman, we function somewhat differently than men, and you have to be prepared. You have to. It's almost like being able to MacGyver a lot of different things, and so it was a little. I found it to be a little intense in the beginning, but then once I got into my comfort zone, I was able to relax and follow the instruction, and I learned a lot. The guys were very helpful. The instructors were extremely helpful. The knowledge and the training that you get out of this unit stays with you for the most part forever. I was very handy as a kid. I was always underfoot with my dad. So I knew my way around a toolbox. I did auto body as a trade on the side, as a hobby. So I wasn't afraid to get dirty. So handling, the tools and the equipment, I always kept myself for the most part in shape. So I didn't really have much problems with the physical part of it. There's the scuba, the rope rescue, and all that I enjoyed very much. Of course, the tactical part of the unit, which was one of my favorite, and there's just so many different things, so many different jobs that you handle out there, that all of this training comes into play. So it's a lot of training. It's a lot of focusing, a lot of detail, and but it was very rewarding, I should say.
Oh yeah. And when you got out of STS, you go to 4, like I said. Were you in John Coughlin's squad, or somebody else was your sergeant?
I was in Sergeant Rodney Gillis's squad. Rodney Gillis came back when I came into the unit. Rodney Gillis came back to the unit for a short period of training, and then he was back. Went back to the trucks because he was promoted to sergeant, and then he went to the precinct. So when my class came back in, Rodney was brought back. So he wound up being my training sergeant in the truck also, along with the truck 4 guys. But yes, John Coughlin was there. Another very nice man.
Oh yeah, he was there at the time. Steve Lanos was there. Franco
Yeah.
Baraducci. Jerry Kozlowski. Quite a few guys
Yes.
that have been on the show that worked in 4. So it's a good truck. You got a lot of guys to learn from. But let's focus on Sergeant Gillis for a second, because here's a guy that understands both. He was a cop in the unit. Now he's a boss in the unit. So he has a lot of experience. Tell me about some of the biggest lessons he taught you early on.
One of the things, when at Rodney, I actually met Rodney through my husband. He was my husband's training sergeant in the 7-7 before he came back.
Right.
So we had met, and I actually didn't know he was one to be my training sergeant in the 4 truck. One of the things he told me was to never take anything personal, to understand that the guys in the truck don't know you just yet. So don't take it personal if they're not very vocal towards you or anything, but follow their lead. Follow their lead. You're going to learn a lot, and just understand that it's you're new, and it's going to take a little bit of time until they get to understand how you work and how you operate. And it really didn't take long to get to know these guys. It was they were all very helpful. I mean, guys like Richie Miller, Jimmy McGrath, Billy Madigan, Joe Briggs, Joe Ocasio.
Oh yeah.
Even though these guys were in my squad, all the rest of the guys, Steve Lanos, Franco Baraducci, all of those guys, I had such a wonderful time with them there. So, and just because they weren't in my squad, they didn't. It's not that I didn't get to learn a little bit of something from each and every one of them.
Right. You blend across the squads. And sometimes guys are working in the squad on overtime and whatnot, or swaps. So, that kind of helps that you're able to, by osmosis, work with these guys too, even if they're not assigned directly to the squad. And Joe Ocasio was on the show previously, also a former, EMRU tunnel rat with the Transit Police Rescue Unit. So he had a lot of experience with that too. Another great guy. Saw him at 2 Truck last month for the 9/11 breakfast that we had there. Now, as far as that rookie year, if you will, in ESU in '98, is there a major job you can recall from that specific year?
Oh, gosh, there's so many. In 4 truck, one of them that I can remember is we got a job. It was in the early morning, not very around 11 o'clock, I think it was. And there was a hotel that a young lady, I believe, was taken against her will, and we were asked, to respond to that location, which was a hotel. And we wound up having to take a couple of doors in a few of the hotel, a few of the doors. And upon entry, it was a very interesting sight for every room that we went to, until we finally found the location. And subsequently, the young lady was safe, and the person was placed into custody. But in order to get to that person, we wound up, there was a lot of, how should I say, nudity involved in a lot of these rooms that we had to open. But it was that job. There's just so many. From bridge jobs to barricades to pin jobs, there are so many, and they're all so different. Gosh, you respond to so many, it's just hard to remember all of them.
It's a blend, it is a blend. That's the thing about ESU, is that one of them can be tactical like that, but then there's a rescue job involved, because,
Get a rescue, from an auto extrication to just simply getting, someone's keys out of their car, for whether it's an officer or civilian, or just retrieving somebody's, keys from a sewer grate, So it's just the simple things. It's the little things that, you feel good out there trying to, helping someone, especially if it's another cop. You just want to be there for them. You never want to leave one of them waiting. You try to, if they're sitting on a door that has to be secured, you want to get there so they can take care of that, so that they could be on their way, whether they could get to their meal or if they can get home early to their family. So it's just the little things, those little jobs that also mean a lot too, that you respond to.
Yeah, I remember Carl Duenzo telling me something a while ago when I had him on, which is service is our middle name, and I'm sure you heard that a lot. So even
Yeah.
little things like that, people might look at it as basic jobs. So wait a minute, the police do that? Yeah, they do. Get your keys out of a sewer grate, get your keys out, that are locked in your car. So
Mhm.
that's the interesting part of ESU. It's that people focus on the big jobs as they should. They're
Yeah.
big jobs and they're well done. But it's those little jobs too that make a lot of difference because there's somebody out there that remembers that story and appreciates what
Yeah.
you did for them.
Yes.
So it means a lot. It makes a huge difference. I will say, because Joe also brought this up when we were talking at Two Truck. Four Truck is pretty close to Yonkers. You're not that far away. And granted,
Yeah.
Yonkers does have their own ESU. So if there's major emergencies, they're equipped to respond to that. But did you ever have any jobs where they called you guys for assistance, given how close you guys are?
When I was on, more so when I was in the midnights, a lot of the times on the midnights, sometimes they would need an extra body up in the north. So sometimes from 10 truck, I'd fly up to 3 truck or 4 truck for the night. And a lot of the times there were pin jobs that would basically right at the border of Yonkers. And yes, we would respond and we'd give them an extra hand if they needed it. A lot of the times it was the same thing, with the trucks. We border each other in ways. 3 truck and 10 truck are literally right over the bridge. 4 truck, and we'll respond and we'll help each other out. But yes, I do recall responding to jobs with Yonkers and helping them out right at the border. Most of the time they were pin jobs.
Yeah, that accents are always tricky there, and you also have the FDNY in that area too. I think that's in Rescue Three's territory, so you
Yeah.
sometimes see them at jobs as well. But it helps, listen, as long and Paulie Perricone brought this up too. He's like, you have these 2 elite units, in this case 3 if you count Yonkers ESU, racing to get to you. So if you're in a bind in that portion of the city, you never want to have a car crash. But if you're going to crash your
Right.
car anywhere, you might as well crash it there. Because you got the hand of 3 different units, and John Latanzio says a lot of airbag requests to Yonkers. So I can
Yeah.
imagine, and he would know. He spent a lot of time over in 3, in addition to 5 truck too. So around 2000, you got a couple years in ESU by this point. This was right before 9/11. Was there a point early on where obviously you still have a lot to learn, but was there a point early on in your tenure where you felt, okay, I feel like I belong in the unit now. I feel like I'm part of the team.
Mhm. Yeah, once I got comfortable at 4 truck, I felt better. I felt more. I had a better understanding of what the unit was about and how well respected we were and how important it was not to embarrass yourself or embarrass the unit. You wore that patch and you realized how important it was to the guys, the men and women that wore it. And Not too long after, I was in 4 truck, I had both my boys. I was pregnant twice while I was in the unit, and I had both my boys, so I did have to come off patrol at some point. And After my first son was born, that's not too long after that is when I went to Queens. So I wound up in 10 truck after that. So that's when things change, and most trucks, operate in somewhat of the same way, but the areas are different. A 10 truck covers a lot of highway,
Hmm.
so we handle a lot of pin jobs, a lot of VAs, and pretty bad ones too, uh, and a lot of perk jobs. Um, and again, like I said, I did midnights right after 9/11, and I decided that I needed to go to midnights, not just, for my kids, but, for other reasons too. But my daughter thought that I had gotten killed during 9/11, and speaking to her on the phone that day, that's when I realized I had to go to midnights. I had to be home, with my kids. So from that, after, I left 4 truck and wound up in 10, that's where I spent the rest of my career. And I wound up having my other son while I was there too. I mean, I actually, one of the things I had also had to realize is that I couldn't put a hold on my life. Although as much as I enjoyed working and I enjoyed the job and I enjoyed working, handling all these different things and the challenges of what we did, I had to also, live my life and have my family. So that took a big part of a good amount of time away from the trucks also. But for the most part, I enjoyed it very much. I made it work for me. I made it work for my family.
Of course, and it's not easy for men or women to have families in the first responder community. It applies to the fire department just as much as it does to the police department because it's not the usual job. It's not like you're in an office cubicle typing away 9 to 5 and then you can go home. Sometimes you're working those late tours. Sometimes right when your tour is about 10, a job comes in and guess what? Now you're on overtime and you end up missing certain things. So I commend you because that's not an easy balance to have, especially for a mom.
It was difficult, especially with my husband being on the job, juggling back and forth, the kids, working the midnights, overtime. If I get a late job, am I going to get home in time? It was constantly a back and forth, but somehow, some way, we always made it work. And the ESU and the bosses and everything, they were always very good. They understood for the most part. The guys in the trucks understood. A lot of the guys also, they had to work midnights too because that's what worked for them. It was a tough tour to work, and I did it from 2001 all the way to the end of my career, and it does take a toll on you, and it can take a toll on your family life too. So it's not just women, on the job. It's a lot of the men too. I have to say it's tough on them too in their families.
No, I can imagine. Yeah, no, without question, and again, hats off to them for doing it. So getting to 10, was this before 9/11 or after that you got to 10, just for context?
I got to truck 10 before 9/11.
Okay.
Just
So one of the reasons I bring that up is there's Paul Talty, and I don't know if he worked midnights. I'm not sure. I don't believe he did. Tom Langone was also there. I don't know if you have too many memories of them, but if you do, I'd love it if you share
I
them.
have some, not a lot. Sadly, they passed away, and I really didn't get to know them as well as I would have loved to. I do know that they were both, especially I have an amazing, a really wonderful picture with Tommy Langone on top of the Brooklyn Bridge with Jerome Dominguez, Vigiano. And this was actually not too long before 9/11. And I have to say, Tommy Langone was an absolutely exceptional emergency cop, as well as Paul Talty. And I wish I did get to know them a lot better.
Yeah. Anita said it best about Tom that if there was an ESU chip, it was in his brain.
Yeah,
He really loved that unit. And Steph knows. Steph worked with them. That guy,
he
man,
was
I would have
really,
loved to have got him on the show.
yes,
Yeah, great
really nice.
E-man.
I wish I had the opportunity to pick his brain, more in regarding, ESU and get to know him a lot more. I'm sure I'm pretty positive I would have learned a lot from him.
Oh
And
yeah.
I can guarantee a lot of the other guys learned a lot from him also.
After this, you have a lot of running around to do as a whole. And just focusing on 10 truck, you're trying to make sure the bridges are secure, any kind of soft targets. You do have Shea Stadium in your territory at the time. Now it's Citi Field, but at the time it was Shea Stadium. And you're trying to protect that as the Mets finish out the season. So this was a lot going on citywide, but especially in Queens for your particular area. So tell me about trying to keep things secure on the counterterrorism front after 9/11, while also still managing the regular jobs that were coming in over the radio.
Well, it's regarding 9/11. I mean, we spent many hours down at the site, but at the end of the day, we still had a job to do over at the truck. So many of us would be there was some of us that would be at the truck for the day, and because at the time I was on midnights, and we would be at the truck, and then some of us would split us up, and some would go down to the site and work down there for the evening. So it was just like almost any other day. You have to, pay attention to what's going on. You don't know you still have this thought in your mind: is this it? Is there going to be another attack against us? But you can't let that stop you from going out there and doing your job. You have to stay focused on the jobs that are coming in and take care of them, and then move on to the next one. And then, like I said, there were some of us that were down at the site, and we switched up. But for the most part, I during 9/11, I did a lot more time down at the site on the midnights. And the other guys, there were a few guys that would, man the truck, if they were trucking at them, depending on the manpower.
Mhm.
It was a lot of the manpower was down, at the site at the time. But somehow the jobs got answered, whether it was 10 truck or any of the other trucks, the jobs got answered. A lot of these areas, such as the stadiums and high profile areas, were all, were being taken care of and being watched. Especially not just with emergency service, but with other units, counterterrorism, all those other units were out there too. There was a lot of things, that a lot of units that were out there that people didn't know about, that were also making sure that they were safe. So, like I said, as regardless of what happened, the jobs got done.
Oh yeah.
Whether it was big, somehow or another, ESU and the other units managed to get the jobs done, especially ESU. There were big jobs that sometimes, the truck would handle by itself, or the Atom car would handle by itself, or if necessary, another car from another, adjoining area would come and help out. So there was always enough personnel there to get what needed to be done.
Somebody, preferably Sam Katz, who's written a lot of books on ESU, has to write a book on that specific time period of what you guys were doing after, because everybody focuses on the heroism that day, as they should. It was a lot of great work that you guys did that day, but it's the days and months afterwards, from 2001 really up until the site got cleaned up in 2002 in May, that I wish somebody would chronicle that time period in written form, because man, you guys were up against it, but you handled it so well.
It was a lot. There were days, you spent many hours away from your family, sometimes with just one day off. In the beginning, guys were working every single day. It got to a point where, guys needed rest, guys needed to get home. It's like the psychological effects that, take a toll on you also. Your family, and, at some point in time, you had to be home for a few hours, just, to kind of like decompress from everything that was going on. And then you just come back the next day and you do it all over again.
Keep going, keep soldiering on. Your older sister, I should say, is in the chat. She says, proud of my little sister, Jessica Arroyo's watching. So she's tuning in. She commented on the post earlier on Instagram saying that she would be watching. Good to see you, Jessica. Glad you're tuning in. So you mentioned being close to the bridges. I asked Glenn about this. I want to ask you too. You get a lot of MVAs. Sometimes they're not pretty, but sometimes you get to make really, really great rescues. What's an MVA that sticks out where it had a happy ending? You were able to make a great rescue in 10.
Let's see. Actually, it was actually involving a motorcycle right at the foot of the Whitestone Bridge, and it turns out that I actually later on I wound up didn't realize that I actually knew this guy. It was a motorcycle coming from the Cross Island onto the Whitestone Expressway, just at the foot of the bridge, and the guy, unfortunately, there was sand, and it was the motorcycle actually wiped out, and thank God he had a full motorcycle suit on. When I got there, I saw the motorcycle was probably a couple 100 feet away from where he landed, and he was leaning against the car for us. Another car had stopped to help him out, but I don't think he realized it until his adrenaline started to come down, and his jacket had a tear in it, and there was some blood running down his hand. I noticed that he started, sweating, and I looked at him and I saw the tear, and when I realized it, I sat him down. His arm was partially detached from his body. He had a partial amputation, and we had to get him to Bellevue right away, to find out, like I said, later on. My husband and I are big into motorcycles, and we used to ride with this group. And a couple days later, I got a phone call from a friend that they were able to save his arm, and we provided medical attention to him. I'm hoping that was helped also for him. But yeah, that was it felt good to know we were able to help him where he was able to. The doctors were able to save his arm. I remember that one. And I mean, one towards the end. It was more towards the end of my career. There's some that really stick with you. Some of them, you're using the auto extrication tools, the jaws of life, to get them out. and you basically pop the doors, and you're able to, provide medical attention to them and remove them from the vehicle. But that one really kind of stays focused in my mind, because I actually, knew this person.
Mm.
Even if I didn't, I mean, it's a good feeling to know that you were able to help someone, and to get a phone call a couple of days later thanking you for helping them. Um, but not all these pin jobs, they're all so different. How when you're approaching them, one could be multiple bodies in the car, one it could be just one body. It's all in, how, the car is when you get to it, and how you're going to approach it, and where you're going to start, how, without, putting any more, pushing any more injury onto the person inside. There's so many different techniques that you learn. A lot of these guys that were in emergency are also volunteer firemen. So they've had a lot of training prior to coming here. I had the opportunity to learn different techniques from some of them, especially not only in STS, but also on the outside. You're taught a certain way in STS, but you learn so many different techniques also from these guys. The knowledge that, that these guys have is so good, so much to learn from them. And it's some of the simplest little things, that you can actually, just taking a door off, to removing someone from the vehicle, removing the roofs, dash displacements, all of those things. And there's other ways other than the way we were taught in STS to do these things. So it was very, very rewarding, and especially when you're able to get somebody out, and save their life, and and they're able to recover from their injuries. And a lot of these pin jobs, you when you get to them, you look at them and you wonder how some of these people survive these things, the way these cars are mangled. Um, there was another one on the Grand Central Parkway at 188th Street going eastbound. A vehicle that actually went airborne, flipped over. The engine was completely ripped from the vehicle. There was a young lady that was still in the vehicle. Another one was thrown from the vehicle. We were able to get her out. To this day, I don't know if she survived her injuries from it, but she was still alive when we got her out. How they people manage to drive at the speeds that they do, and some survive and some don't. And a lot of the times, it's crazy, because from what I see, it's always the driver that survives, and the passengers wind up, losing their lives.
Yeah.
I did have and then one other one by Roosevelt Avenue, which another young lady that I happen to know. Sadly, early in the morning, she was thrown from a vehicle, and I remember that one specifically. It was pretty much unrecognizable until I found out later on. So it's very, if they, they can be these are very traumatic injuries when you get to them. And like I said, it's a miracle that some people come out alive with them, and a lot of the times it's just senseless. There's feeding at 4 o'clock, it's the witching hour. After 3 o'clock is like the witching hour in ESU. On a Friday night and a Saturday night, comes 3 o'clock, the bars are letting out, people are going home, and they're speeding at rates that you're like, why? Just get home. And it's so unnecessary and so avoidable. And a lot of the times they say, most people, sadly lose their lives in NVAs within 5-10 minutes from their home.
Yeah. They're
You know,
right there. They're right there.
out there, and they never make it home.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate.
Absolutely. As you say that, I'm a Yankee fan. I'm thinking about Billy Martin. If you remember, that's how Billy Martin died. He was in his driveway. He had one too many to drink that night. He was in his driveway. He made it home, and he crashed into a tree and died. So it's very senseless that way. And especially, listen, you see it a lot with younger people. I heard so many horror stories, and this is why it's good to do these interviews both with FD and PD, because you guys have told me so many stories like this that when I got my car a few months ago, I'm like, okay, not going to do that, nor that, or that, and I drive very carefully. Even on the highway, when I'm going 70, I'm like, okay, chill out, relax.
It's like, when you have your kids too, as soon as the first time when my son and my daughter got their driver's license, it's a very scary feeling, especially after you see some of these accidents and you deal with them, and then you see your kid get into a car and drive off. It's a pretty scary thing, but they got to live. You got to let them grow.
Well, listen, I'm behind the wheel of a Toyota, so that's indestructible, so I'm good. Those things last until the end of time. That and Hyundais for that matter, too.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you about this in 10 truck, and every truck gets them, some more than others. You get a lot of EDPs in 10, and I'm not just counting Met fans, although they're certainly part of it. But tell me about some notable EDPs over in Queens.
I haven't, there's an EDP in truck 10, and that's Steve Stephanakis. But
yes.
Yes, we do get a lot of EDPs in truck 10. A lot of the times on the midnights, like I said, I did mostly midnights. I did day tours one every now and then, but for the most part, we did get a lot of EDPs on the midnights. Sometimes the same one, every now and then. A lot of EDP jumpers that would but for the most part, we handle them same way as some of the rest. A lot of the times, if we had to use a taser, we use it. If we didn't, a lot of the times it's just talking. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors in someone's home. A lot of guys and girls, they're going through tough times. The mentally ill. You just don't know what you're going to get. And you have to approach it a certain way, and you have to be able to talk to somebody. You have to be able to talk to them and have them try to get them to understand that we're there to help them. We're not there to hurt them. And you can't always, make promises, because like I said, a lot of the times we have gotten the same EDP, and you don't want to make promises to them because they don't forget.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It can be very rewarding when you're talking to somebody that's going through such a tough time, and they either want to, if they want to hurt themselves, or they just need somebody. Sometimes they just want somebody to talk to, and it's a simple thing like that. Either they lost someone that they loved, or they just it's just a mental illness, and they just having a bad day. They didn't take their medication. And Steve's written something. But for the most part, it's yes, we did get a lot of EDPs.
No, I can imagine, especially in that area. Oh, and again, it's anywhere, anywhere in the city, but it's like I said, some more than others. And what's interesting, and I remember talking about this with Eddie Hayes, who later went out to the bomb squad, but he was in ESU prior in the 80s, is that you guys are trained as emergency psychological technicians, which is important. You can't just show up and know what to say. It takes a lot of training. It takes a good understanding of how to handle these situations, because sometimes it's not what you say that can really help a person. Sometimes it's even what you don't say.
Yeah, it's actually, the emergency service unit, they did provide us, we did get a lot of training. We did have, we did go to a few different things that would help you with trying to understand, get into the mindset of someone that's going through a tough time. And I have to say, Steve Stephanakis is very well rounded when it comes to EDPs and working with and teaching a lot of these things. The instruction that I remember having, it helped me a lot. I was able a few times to to talk to people and come to an ending, a good ending, where they came out of the apartment, or they came off of the rooftop, and it worked out. And that's the way you want it to end. And you have a lot of very talented men and women in this unit that are able to talk to people and get them to understand, like I said, that we're there to help them. We're not there to hurt them. We want to bring them to a better place and get them the help that they need.
No, of course. Sometimes it's about getting to that next day, and you're seeing that now.
Yeah.
And it gets said often to the point where sometimes it sounds cliche, but it's not. You're really not alone because somebody wants to see you get to that next day. Sometimes it's a stranger in the form of you guys coming in there, but why are you guys there? You don't want the person to make that very fatal mistake, which is it's important that, and it's good that you guys have that training as not only EMTs but EPTs, emergency psychological technicians, like I said. So ESU, and especially once you become more senior in the unit, you get to do a lot of cool details. What's a detail that you got to do that you look back on and thought, wow, that was really cool? Not counting your time, of course, as a counter
Uh,
sniper.
uh, the Pope. I
Mm.
was actually on the counter sniper team when the Pope came into. I think he was at Yankee Stadium.
I think so.
I think he was at Yankee Stadium. I still have some of the credentials that they gave us for when he came. I found that I enjoyed that detail very much. Many of the details I did was when I was did more on the counter sniper team a
Mhm.
lot of the time. So it's all over the city, not just City Fields, Yankee Stadium, Shea Stadium when it was Shea Stadium, um, the UN. Um, the Christmas tree lighting, Radio City, all of those things, the top of the rock. I remember spending so many Christmas tree lighting details at top of the rock. It was another favorite of mine. But I enjoyed the UN, being on top of the library many times. And I remember closing out Billy Joel closing out Shea Stadium. I had that detail with Rob Metzel. Him and
Oh,
I
yeah.
grew up on that, and the atmosphere up there, you could actually feel the entire stadium shaking. So that was another good detail that we did. Um, and presidential details, those are big. All these dignitary, when the UN comes in, everybody's on edge. When all these dignitaries come in and these heads of state, so everybody's on edge. Nobody wants anything to happen. So I enjoyed the rooftop details very much. I mean, there were cold days, hot days, parades. Yeah, another, the St. Patty's Day parade, Puerto Rican Day parade, another one, Thanksgiving Day parade,
Oh,
another
yeah.
real parade. So a lot of this was for Overwatch and for other police, of course, for other cops too. Same thing like at U.S. Open, another one. Many spent many days on the top of the stadiums over there. So I enjoyed that very very much. I was especially um, what do you call it? Flushing Meadow Park, the towers.
Mm.
Uh, I would have never thought in my lifetime that I'd be spending, some hours at the top of the towers that are now being under construction over in Flushing Meadow Park from the World's Fair, 1950. I forget what I think 63 World's Fair.
Believe around there. It started in the 40s,
40s,
and
but I
then,
think
yeah,
I remember
extended to the 60s.
my mother came from Puerto Rico in 1956, and then sometime she said she went to the World's Fair in
Yeah,
Flushing
I'm
Meadow.
sure. I think it was still around that time.
I think it was in the 60s.
Yeah.
But I, spending hours up there in the towers, it's like wow, I would have never thought I'd be sitting on one of these towers. Actually, we're doing Overwatch for the police guys,
Mm.
in the park area while they were there because there's so many police officers, for the stadium detail and stuff. So I enjoyed for the most part, I enjoyed that very much.
Oh yeah, the stadium details are great. I always tell this story and it's hilarious. I had some time to kill a few years ago and I was going through YouTube, some old school Yankees clips from the late 90s. And Shane Spencer, good old Shane Spencer, the home run dispenser, hits a home run in the playoffs 1998 against Texas. And at the old Yankee Stadium, for those of you that are baseball fans, this the old Yankee Stadium Monument Park was in left field. It was under a netting so that the monuments didn't get damaged by home run balls. When Shane hit the home run right before Monument Park, a cop catches the ball. He's on the detail there, and he gets to catch the ball. And I'm like, this guy, man, what a life! What a life! You get to be in there for free. You get a
Mm.
bird's eye view of the game, and you get a home run ball. I would have
So
became a cop just for that.
those which were a lot of fun. Those were the perks of not only just being on the sniper team, but being a cop, having whether if you had the stadium. A lot of the 4-4 cops had the stadium detail, and they spent the entire summer there. I remember, when the 4-4 used to have stadium day, we had the entire stadium to ourselves. So we had a lot of fun, back then. But yeah, those were the perks of being and getting those details. I mean, you still had a job to do, but those were the days. As far as working as a cop, the little perks that come with it.
Oh, of course. And I also tell this story, and I'll say it again because I hate him for this. I'm kidding. I love you, but I also still hate you for this, Pete Segretti, which is his LinkedIn profile picture is him during the 2009 World Series on a counter sniper position in Yankee Stadium. And you could see Mark Teixeira at the plate in the background.
Yeah.
Like, you jerk. The things I would do to trade places with you, Pete. I hate you. And I say that kiddingly, of course.
Yeah.
I love you, Pete. Come on the show.
If you hate Pete, I mean, he probably had a great view, but I can tell you right now, the view from the top of Yankee Stadium, not only the new Yankee Stadium, the old one that we spent many hours up there. The view up there is like it's a beautiful view. I mean, you can see the entire stadium, including behind from the new park that they built for the community.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball fields and the courts and everything like that. They did a great job over there for them. So they promised them a new park and they gave it to them.
Oh yeah. Shout out to Pete. Please come on the show. I say
Yeah,
I hate you. I hate you kiddingly.
Another good man. Another guy, another great guy. Training when it comes to training. Another great guy. Very knowledgeable young man.
Oh yeah, he says he's not interesting. That's a lie. Come on the show. Quit holding out
Yes,
on me. So
yes, yes,
hopefully I will get you on the show soon, Pete. He's like, I'm not talkative. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, Pete. I remember Pete very well. Yes. Him and he worked. He was a 4-4 cop too.
He was?
I believe so. Yeah. I believe
Yeah,
Pete.
so.
I don't know. I could be wrong. His partner. Oh my gosh, I got a little brain fart just now.
Why don't you guys put it in the chat for those of you that know Pete? Yeah, put it in the chat. I'll put it up later.
Yeah. But Pete, yes, great guy. He did a lot of the training in ESU for us as far as tactical stuff, and he was very, very good at it. Very good.
Vasquez? Garrison?
Eddie Vasquez.
Yep. Eddie Vasquez. There you go. All right, thanks. Thanks, Joe. Listen, when in doubt, go to your e-cops. They come through as always. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. So, let me ask you about getting into the counter sniper portion of ESU. It's an interesting place to be. Not many guys or gals can go there, for that matter. Tell me about the opportunity and why you wanted that, if you wanted that.
As a kid, I wasn't sure in the beginning if I really wanted it. There were other young ladies that were in the unit before me, Maddie Lawrence being one of them. And, you don't want to step on anybody's toes. I didn't volunteer to, anything. Usually it would go, they would give the rifles to the senior people as others moved on or retired and had a rifle, and they would pass that rifle down to the next senior person if they were interested. At the time, Maddie had turned it down. She didn't have an interest in it at the time. And they decided that they were going to do a shoot-off up at Rodman's Neck. And if you were interested in getting on the team, you could try out. So I remember as a kid, having an uncle that was very big into hunting. And, so I had thought about, I said, wow, that would be fun to go out there. That's interesting. And I also found that as to be a challenge. But, always big into camping and being out there with the little pellet guns and stuff like that as a kid. So I said, you know what, I'll try out with the respect, of Maddie. And I figured, I said, okay, I try out. And I went up there with the rest of the guys. And prior to me actually going up there, about a few days before, knowing that it was coming up, I went up to the range and I spoke to one of the range instructors. And I talked to him about, the rifle. And I said, you think I could, practice a little bit before I try out? And he was more than happy. And I thank him to this day. He took me out there and practiced with me, let me get comfortable with the rifle, and gave me some, techniques on what to do. And, breathing being one of the big things. And then the day came up where we tried out. And I have to say, I was a little nervous. I was the only female trying out with all the rest of these guys, some that were in the military, some that I'm sure that were, really good shots and probably knew a heck of a lot more about rifles than I did, especially precision rifles. Young man, a cop that was up there by the name of Steve Hazen. I thank him to this day. A very extremely knowledgeable guy, and to this day, if I had any questions, I would definitely reach out to him also when it comes to this stuff. And we tried out. We had to shoot, I believe it was at 100 yards, 3 rounds. And basically, what the instructors were looking for was to see what your grouping was. And they wanted to make sure. I mean, these rifles are not sighted for us, the ones that we were shooting, because these are rifles that were other guys, but we had to use a rifle to try out. So we were told basically, you're shooting, for group, and we're going to take it from there. So my turn came up. I followed the instruction from the few days before of what the range instructor told me, and I stuck to what he told me, and I fired my 3 rounds. And after that, we weren't allowed to see what our papers looked like. They said they would call us and let us know from there. I was on my way home, and of course, I didn't know, I wasn't sure how I did. I was on the LIE when I got a phone call from, and I'll never forget it to this day, Steve Hayden. And he told me, he goes, I know that you're probably wondering how you did. And I said, yeah, I am. I says, but I guess I'll find out, eventually, when I'm on, I'm on the team or not. And he said, well, I want to tell you though, you shot in the top 3. And I said, I did. And he goes, yeah, you did. You did very well. And and that was it. And we talked later on, talked another day, and later on to find out that I was going to be on the team later. One of the bosses called me and told me that I made the team. So from there on, from that moment on, later on, eventually the training came up. It was I believe a couple weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks, if I can remember correctly. It might have been 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but it's a lot of things to learn. It's a big other than any firearms responsibility. Anybody that handles firearms or carries, it's a big responsibility. But when you get on when you're handling these rifles, it becomes a bigger responsibility, because you're expected. There are certain things that not only do other cops expecting from you. This is not military sniper stuff. It's totally different. You're in an urban environment now, so it's a lot different training, and it was a little bit. I could say I was a little bit nervous about it. There's a lot of technical stuff, that I had to continuously go over and over again. But I have to say, the instructors, along with other guys, on the team that were also learning, we helped each other out. You rooted each other on. You're talking about a piece of equipment that you must stay focused. You have to pay a lot of attention to detail, patience. Especially you have to have the ability to handle a job under a lot of pressure. You have to be able to ultimately react smoothly and also efficiently. It's a lot of equipment that you're carrying, from the rifle to other equipment, from binoculars to night vision stuff, on top of other gear that you really need to have, depending on the weather. So many different things come into play with these rifles, whether it's weather, sight, light, whether it's dark outside, it's light outside, it's warm, it's cold, so many of these different things come into play, especially with the job where it's at. You're dealing with a lot of buildings, it could be in commercial areas, school areas. So you have to have that right mindset, and you have to, like I said, pay a lot of attention to detail. And you also have, you have to keep up your training. I enjoyed going to training. As if I could go to training at least once a week, when it came to the rifle, which helps you and makes you become more proficient at it. I would have done it at least once a week if I could. I looked forward to the details all the time. It didn't matter what detail. If it was a Yankee Stadium detail, hey, that's awesome. But if it was a detail that involved the UN, or just a detail that involved a dignitary coming into the city, then so be it. This is what I signed up for. So it could be the coldest day I ever had, and it was crazy because in 2018 when I retired, I said I wanted to work on New Year's Eve. I had enough seniority that I didn't have to work New Year's Eve details, for a long time during towards the end of my career. But that year, particular year, and it was the coldest day I could imagine. But I enjoyed every minute of it because I wanted to work with the guys that day. I wanted to be there on New Year's Eve, because I actually remember when I first came on the job. One of the first I came out in March, and then then I had the New Year's Eve detail in Times Square, and as a rookie cop, and I froze my butt off that day, and here I am, my last day, my last detail of my career, and I froze it was so freezing out. But again, that's what I wanted to be on the team, and I had to take the bad with the good regardless, and it was good. I learned a lot, and I thank the instructors up at the range, and the guys that if I had questions, they were able to answer it. I enjoyed competing, competing with some of the guys, when you're out there shooting. You had good days and you had bad days during practice, but that's where that's why you go to training. And so that way when you are out there, you can have the right mindset and you can stay focused and you can handle those jobs under the pressure that you are. And again, like I said, it was a very big responsibility. I was very proud to be on the team. And if I had the choice to do it, I would do it all over again. I would absolutely do it all over again. It was one of the proudest things that I did on this job. It really was. And it wasn't at the time that I was on the team. In the unit, when I had the rifle, I was the only woman to have it at the time, and it was good. You got a lot of looks. The guys out there, other cops thought it was really cool. I'm 5'1". I'm not a tall person, but I had a lot of gear, and I handled my business. I did everything I needed to do, as for being part of the team, and I enjoyed every day that I did it. Every day that I had a job that we had to go out or detail, it was just, for me, it was a lot of fun. It was just it was a challenge. And if working with these guys, I have to say, like I said, the knowledge that these guys had that they could give me, and in the camaraderie, and the calls that I would get sometimes. Hey, Tina, you did a great job. That was good. It's things like that made me feel really good. You go home that day, you feel so good. Knowing that you did the unit proud. You made the guys were happy. You didn't embarrass yourself, or the unit for that matter. But yeah, the sniper team was one of the nice highlights of my career, I would say.
Well, I'll say, and I loved seeing your face light up, recalling those memories, as you were telling the story of how you got in and the details throughout. Because again, as if being in ESU isn't unique enough, then you get into an even smaller niche in a unit, in a portion of the unit like that. And it was highly enjoyable. Before you continue, Aaron Cook has a question in the chat. If we could highlight that. He wants to know how many years, because you got there in 1998, did you have an emergency service when you went to the tryout for the sniper team?
I believe, if I'm correct, 2006 or 2009. I came into ESU in '98, and I believe I got on the team either 2006 or 2009. It might have been 2006.
So close to a decade.
Yeah, definitely all the way to the end of my career.
Yeah.
So I had it most of my career in ESU for the most part.
So it's kind of an even split, because 8 years before it, and then of course 12 years with it when you got there, like as you said, in '06. So I'll ask you, 2018. By this point, it's kind of numerically, it's perfect. 25 years on the job, 20 years in ESU when you left. Some guys or gals want to retire at that perfect number mark. Certain people, it's just coincidence, and they decide, hey, it's time to go. When did you know what? I had a great run, but it's time to move on with my life and do something else?
Well, actually, I didn't. My husband did. He was the. So I knew it was time. It was time to leave. Financially, it was a very good time. I was blessed, and and as I was going to leave in 20, and my husband told me, no, you don't want to leave. You're not ready to go. And he was right. I was not ready to go. And I thank God that I stayed the other 5 years, because it was the best I ever did on top of the career, and of course financially later on. But I didn't want to go, but I knew I had to go. It was time. I also, I lost a lot of time with my kids. As a mother, you want to be there. You want to. I missed out on so many things. So between that and the timing and financially, it was the right time for me to go. I just had to face that. And the day came that my husband went me down to put my papers in. I have to say was probably the toughest day for me. It was the toughest day for me because I signed those papers and I went downstairs because that gave them, basically I was letting the job know that, I was going to be leaving. I could have went back up there and pulled those papers at any time, but I went downstairs and we sat in the car and I got upset about it. I wasn't happy. I was not happy at all. And I asked him, why did you make me do this? And then I took it easy and we drove home. I didn't try not to think about it much. And then, I still had a lot of time on the books. I knew I was still going back to work. I wasn't leaving right then and there. So I kind of like blocked it out. And, the days went by and it was for some reason, those days went by just too fast.
They always do, right?
I was hoping that it would go slower, but for some reason those days went by so fast, and I didn't take my terminal leave. I worked. I didn't want to go, but I knew in my heart that I had to go. And that day, not too long after that, the day came that I had to go down and turn in my shield. And as many cops say, it definitely is a bittersweet moment. It really was because, and I bumped into a lot of cops that I was in the academy with that day. A lot of guys, a few girls that I remember from the academy, which meant that they had 25 years also. 25 is a good number. I have absolutely no regrets. It took some time, definitely to adjust. It wasn't easy. At one point, I did want to come back. The job does give you a year where you can, reconsider and you can come back. And it took a good 10 months before I could, settle in and kind of like readjust. It wasn't easy. I mean, working midnights, my kids were asking my husband, why is mom vacuuming or mopping at 2 o'clock in the morning? Is because I couldn't adjust. I literally missed working. I missed my routine. I missed going to work. I actually missed the guys. I missed laughing with them and joking with them. And I tell you, that is what also made my careers is the guys, the way that they made me feel, the joking, the pranks, and I missed all of that. And to this day, we keep a group chat, with the truck, and it never ends. There's always we definitely see each other off and on, with different things. But it was a tough time, but I got through it. It took me a good 10 months to adjust. And I have to say, on top of doing police work, one of the greatest jobs in the world that I can say is being mom,
Oh,
being mom, being a wife. I enjoy very much being home with my 15-year-old and making it to all his, sports things and not being tired and not being cranky and not having to worry about juggling details between my husband and overtime and everything. So a lot of that stress, is gone now. But I have to say, I miss the job very much. I miss it a lot, and I would love to come back.
Steph says, Mike, we don't have enough time to tell you all the jokes we played on Tina. Tina and Lenny family are great people, all part of the family.
Yes, yeah. And I have to say, there's not enough time to sit and talk about the pranks. I think the best pranks in the unit from trucks 1 through 10 were probably played on me. Like I said, and I would never change it for the world. Never, never, ever would I change it for that. It's what made my day. I came to work with a smile on my face, and I always left laughing. I left. We all go through tough times, but for some reason, you could be having a bad day, but the minute the date tour guys come in, it changes it all.
Oh, yeah.
These guys really they took care of me, and I sincerely and will always appreciate that. It was like being a little. I guess you could say I was a little bit of a mother hen in the truck. And that's okay. I think it's just human nature. Yes, there were times that because like I said, these trucks, the unit was never made up for women. It was always predominantly men. So we have bathrooms. We shared the bathrooms, but the guys respected. There was a little thing on the door. You turn it if you're in there. If there's a female in there, but you never know when a little firecracker is going to come thrown in the door while you're in there doing your business. And yeah, I have to say there was a couple times I did want to put a couple of female feminine products in there for these guys, but it wasn't for me. It was for them. But it was all good. It was all good. I wouldn't change my career for the world. Nothing about it, especially the emergency service unit. I there were a bunch of great men and women in this unit, great bosses. Sadly, we lost a lot of them during 9/11, and we're never going to forget them, especially the other officers and the other lives that were lost. But we come back every year together, and we get together, and we get together sometimes for the holidays and for other things. And as a matter of fact, I have to stop by the truck. Steph will probably have something to say to that. He'll probably say stay home or crack some kind of joke. But life goes on. My son is now on the job. He's over in the 115. He's completed 2 years now.
Nice.
And that's another thing. All of our kids in this unit have all grown up together. We know everybody's kids were babies. So a lot of the guys' kids are all on the job now too. So they just keep pushing, and life continues.
Yeah, cycle goes on, and who's to say that they won't be wearing the emergency patch themselves someday? You see that Vigiano son is now in ESU.
Yes, another great guy. His son, Garrett, his dad is proud of him to this day. We all are very proud of him, and he's gonna be a very good emergency cop. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, and since he works in Truck 7, I have to say it. Truck 7, feeling lucky? Yeah.
Yeah. My husband worked in Truck 7, so
great truck.
Yes, a very good truck. It was crazy because before going to Truck 10, I almost, when I left the Bronx, I was gonna go to Truck 7, but my husband being a Brooklyn cop, I felt, you know what, I'll go to another borough. It's better. It's easy. It's better to have that separation there. It's better, for your marriage. But it worked out very well. Not just for both of us, I should say. And we both had amazing careers.
Of course.
From the beginning to the end. And the only one thing that I have to say that I did not do, that a senior man told me in the 4-4, and that was, kid, don't volunteer for anything. Well, I have to say that the best thing I ever did, with all due respects to him, was that I volunteered for a lot, and that made my career.
Absolutely, I'll say. A quarter century's worth of excellent memories and excellent accomplishments, my friend. Congratulations.
Yes,
it was great to get you on the show tonight. This was great.
Very much, yes.
We're not done yet, though. Now we have to end as we always end. You watch the show, so you know what I'm going to do next, and that's the rapid fire. It's the 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. I'll give you an out. You can say pass if you want, and I know you're ready, so I'm going to launch into it. And first, funniest call you ever responded to, either on patrol or in ESU?
Funniest one oh my gosh, I was in ESU. I was working with Maddie Lawrence, and she kind of reminded me of this one. It was actually pretty funny. We had a pretty bad EDP that gave us a tough time. It was a midnight job, and I believe Maddie came over. A truck came to help us out on this one, and I'm not a very tall person. I'm 5'1". I was 100 maybe 50 pounds at the time, and in shape. And this EDP was giving us such a hard time, and unfortunately, he kept, using choice of words towards Maddie that was really pissing me off, because it was really not a nice word. And she responded perfectly back to him, telling him, "Well, I love you too." We actually were able to get him into custody, and out of nowhere, this guy decided he focused on my feet, and he wanted to know whose little feet they were. And it was just like all of this, and this guy's worried about my little feet, you know. So that was pretty funny. The job, I have to say, the job in the Bronx with the hotel was probably one of my funniest, because I think the guys realized, like, you know, going through that the door, and the last door that we hit was a very well endowed young man in the hotel. Um, and it made me a believer. Let's put it this way. So that one, you know, that was a pretty, you know, comical day. So you come across some of the funniest things. One's funnier than the other. Um, Someday, I'm sure Steph or one of these guys will tell you, probably the funniest thing in ESU is the pranks that they played on me, and it involved when your mom's involved, it's pretty good.
I
So,
gotta say, well,
yeah,
I might have to bring you back to talk about that one.
yeah,
And you know what? Because I'm not gonna wait until Steph retires in 2030. Even if I have to go through DCPI, fine. But I'm gonna have to get you on the show, Steph, because I'm not gonna wait until April, 7 years from now, for you to tell me these stories. And there's still more stories to be told. But you know what? Fine. He's in the chat enough. I'm sure he'll do it. And bring
yeah.
Richie Winwood with you for that matter, because he has to come on the show too, for that.
He's a great guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
both, absolutely. Second most uplifting call you ever responded to.
Uh, Most uplifting. Oh gosh, let me see. A jumper. It was a it was transgender, going through transition, nude on a
Hmm.
rooftop, and it actually really was being able to get this young lady down, and trying to get her to understand that, you know, knowing that she was going through a tough time, and the family being there watching, knowing, you know, being afraid that this young lady was going to take her life, you know, because of the situation, her lifestyle and everything, that, you know, the world doesn't understand what some of these young men and women are going through. And being able to get this young lady off with the help of the rest of the guys in the truck. I remember Al Yanasello being there, and these guys helping make the grab. And after she was off the roof, and trying to talk to her, and also letting the family know that she's going to be okay, that she's, you know, we were able to get her down, because she was definitely within minutes. I think this young lady would have, or sadly would have, taken her life,
Hmm.
but thank God we were there, and we were able to get her down and get her the help that she did. So that one was one that that stays in the back of my mind a lot, because it was just a situation, and you could see the what this young lady was going through a really hard time, and that there's, you know, that a lot of people just don't understand. And to watch her family be there, even though they were to the side, and they didn't actually see it, you know, us, you know, get this young lady off the edge of the roof. It felt good to know that we could leave there, knowing that, you know, her family's, you know, it was comforting for them that we were able to get her down and talk to her a little bit, and, like I said, get her to the hospital. So that one stays in my mind a lot, especially with everything going on in this world today. You know, with the LGBTQ community, it's a lot for them, and for this young lady, it was a really tough day for her.
Well, timing's everything. So the fact that you said, you know,
Yeah.
she's a few minutes away, it's a lot of the jumpers. You know, if you get there at the right time, you can bring them back.
Yeah.
Just to go
Yeah,
back.
especially when you're, you know, when you show up to the scene, and you can actually see this person, you know, right on the edge of the roof, you know, and you
Mm,
could see that, and you're trying to get this equipment as quickly as you can, and get up there as fast as you can, and your legs just aren't moving. You can't get up there fast enough, whether it, you know, with the elevators, and uh, but you get there, and you get the rope set up, and you get everybody, you know, working on what job they're going to do at this point, and you work together as a team, and you get the job done. And that's exactly what we did that night. I'm sure Al Yanasello, if he's watching, he probably remember that job. So yeah, that one stays in the back of my mind a lot. No.
That's an uplifting one. You know, anytime you could save somebody's life is an uplifting job. Go back to the first job, and Joe Guerrero says in the chat, I think it was on that job, Boston Road Hotel.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was Boston Road. It was Yes, he was actually right behind me. I
Ah,
believe. I think he was right behind me on that job. I believe it was Joe Casio, Richie Miller, myself. It might have been Jimmy McGrath, Billy Madigan, one of those guys. But I know Joe was on that job. Yes.
and of course, Joe Guerrero, an alumni of the Housing Police Emergency Rescue Unit, as I always like to point out. Third, best advice anyone ever gave you.
Ooh, the best advice is actually, my one of my good friends that I work with in the fourth floor. One of the best things she ever told me is that when you become a cop, don't you know never argue with anybody in the street. Never let them hook you. Never let them get you to a point where you're going to lose your cool and not stay focused on what needs to be done. So it's either you're going to lock them up or you're going to move on. Also to let's see. So many different things that so many things that people told me that were good advice, whether it be financial or when it be on the street. Never letting anybody get into your personal space. Never letting anybody get too close to you, because I see a lot of that now with a lot of this newer generation of cops. It's a different way of policing, and I see just a lot of little things that makes me feel uncomfortable for some of these guys, especially the people getting too close to you when you're in the street, but always to stay focused, always watch each other's back, never take anything for granted. And understand that you're not going to save the world, but if you can help somebody, say whether it's saving somebody's life or pointing in the right direction, or talking to a kid about staying in school, whatever it is, or not doing something that might get them into trouble. It's little things like that I would tell some of these cops today. Again, you're not going to save the world, but if you can make a difference in one day, it's definitely a beautiful thing.
Oh, of course. Well said. Fourth, when you're in New York City, favorite bar or restaurant in New York City? You can say multiple if you want.
Actually, in the city, actually in Queens, I like Blend on the Water in Astoria. During COVID, I actually ordered food from there and drove from Long Island. It took me literally, there was nobody on the road. It took me about 30 minutes to get there and about maybe 20 minutes to get back to Nassau County. So Blend on the Water is a place that I like to go. There's a couple of Spanish restaurants, Pio Pio on Northern Boulevard. I like that one. Oh gosh. I don't really go too much into the city as often as I would like anymore, but Blend on the Water is one of them that I like. There's two of them. There's one in Astoria and there's one down I think it's down by Long Island City area.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I got to get it back down to Washington Heights, particularly. I don't know if this is a two trucks area. I don't think so, but yeah, I got to get down to the Nuevo Caridad. If Nuevo Caridad is still around, that's
Uh,
another great one.
it's on if it's close to Two Truck. I don't know. I know there was a
Not
Caridad.
sure.
There's quite a few Caridad restaurants.
Uh-huh.
Some in the Bronx, some in Manhattan, down in oh gosh, I know there is one by Two Truck, but that one I'm not. I know that there's one not too far from the truck that
Yeah.
is Caridad, and it's pretty much a traditional Dominican restaurant.
Yeah, and Manny Ramirez, because he's a Washington Heights guy, used to be in it all the time, especially whenever the Indians, when he was on the Indians, or when he was on the Red Sox, when they would come to town to play the Yankees, he'd stop there. He actually has a picture up on the wall there, A-Rod too. So yeah, another great restaurant. I don't know if they have any in Queens, but definitely when you said Spanish restaurants, I got thinking about Caridad.
Yeah.
And fifth and finally, what advice, and I'll tweak the question to make it a two-part question, would you give anybody coming on the job now out of the academy or somebody who just got into ESU?
Somebody that just got into ESU, I would say, listen to the instructors. A lot of these guys and girls, they may have knowledge of a lot of different things. You have a lot of guys that are either carpenters, contractors, mechanics. Have so many different the knowledge of so many different things prior to coming into ESU. So those things will help them when they get in along the way. But as far as, instruction, I have to say that the instructors, whether it be tactical, rope rescue, scuba, these guys know what they're doing, and they're going to guide you in the right direction. Even if you know it, be guided by them along utilizing the knowledge of what you have along with it. They're going to get you through it, but it's also in here. You have to want to do this. And once you get through, because the training's a lot longer now, there's a lot more things, a lot of new toys that ESU has that I would love to have learned to play with if I was still in the unit, especially with the tactical stuff. And those guys, they're very good at what they do. And again, just be mindful that these guys know what they're doing. They're going to get you through it, but you just have to pay attention and understand that it's all good. When you get out of there, it's the feeling that you have on graduation, on the STS graduation, is such an amazing feeling. When you get to walk across that straight stage and get your certificate, knowing that you completed, and you do, the training was just so long. It can be intense. You have some, days that you're going at it all day long, from whether it's, learning auto extrication, basic little tools. If for those, not everybody knows their way around a toolbox. You'd be surprised at how many people don't know what a set of dikes are, or how to use, a Phillips screwdriver, or so it's not everybody. Just because you're a guy doesn't mean that you're mechanically inclined. But I can tell you right, by the time you get out of STS, you're going to do very well. You're going to learn a lot, and the guys will get you through it. So I mean, like I said, the knowledge and what I learned in STS in the 6 months, a lot of that's it will stay with me for the rest of my life. Especially, also the EMT, becoming an EMT, which was another very rewarding, thing that certification that you have, that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. And, being able to help somebody, even your own family members, knowing that you have this training, under your belt, that, you can, if God forbid, my two of my kids, I had a Heimlich, one each of them at least once, both, I had two kids that almost choked, and I was able to, Heimlich them, and thank God, everything was okay after that. So you know what to do, and you react right away, and you do what you have to do because it's here. And again, that's going to stay with you forever. I know it's going to stay with me, and I'm very thankful for that. Very thankful.
Absolutely. This has been awesome. Stick around. We'll say our goodbyes off the air. Don't go just yet. Before I say goodbye to the audience, any shout outs to anyone or anything that you would like to give?
I'm going to give a shout out to Steve Stefanakis, because I know my phone is going to be off the hook from the Truck 10 group chat. It's probably started already.
I'm sure it has.
Like I told you before, I wouldn't have it any other way. If I hear from one guy or a couple of these guys or girls, every day, it makes me feel so good. I spoke to Maddie Lawrence just before we went on, and she goes, "Are you going on my?" She goes, "I did my podcast with him." She goes, she's like, "Oh, it's a lot of fun," and she's like, "Oh, we'll talk later and stuff." And like I said, I keep in touch with her. I reach out to Harriet Stevenson every now and then, another amazing young lady that was in the unit. So many, wonderful people that John Latanzio, Walter Sahaj, all these midnight guys from Truck Tent, from Truck 3, John McClure, Tony Johnson, these are guys, Tony Johnson, we all go out on motorcycles together, because that's another thing that we love to do, is we're big into motorcycles. So we go on a lot of trips with the bikes and stuff. We're probably going to go for a ride this week with them.
Nice.
These are all guys from Ford Truck that I learned a lot from, and guys like, Richie Simon, Glenn Klein from 10 Trucks, Steve Stefanakis, all these guys, again, all knowledgeable, wonderful guys. It also in the other trucks too. Just because I worked in 4 and 10 doesn't mean that myself or any other ESU cops didn't learn things from the rest of the guys in other trucks. You have extremely amazing guys and girls in all the other trucks too. So, and it's a lot of fun to get together with them. I definitely will. The last thing I would ever not is not stay in touch with them.
Absolutely. No, it's a great unit, and I've gotten to be introduced to the family a little bit across these interviews, and it's great. And my shout out goes out to all the cops, past and present, active and retired. You guys have treated me wonderfully. Those I've met in person, those I've met through this podcast. You've let me into your world, and I appreciate that. Same with the Bomb Squad guys, but ESU, you guys have been wonderful to me, and I cannot say enough about that.
I say, Mike, we appreciate it. And I know that the rest of the guys in the unit appreciate it. You've done some wonderful things. I've listened to a lot of the podcasts. There's a few that I missed, and I'm going to actually go on and watch them this evening. So I thank you. I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come on and speak with you and open up, into my little world that I had in ESU. and like I said, if I could do it all over again, I absolutely would in a heartbeat. I had a lot of fun, a blessed and amazing career.
This was a blast. Like I said, stick around. We'll say our goodbyes off the air. And like I said, shout out to everybody who tuned in tonight, especially all my e-cops. Male or female, you guys do a great job. Doesn't matter the gender, you guys get it done. And that patch emergency carries a lot of weight. It has for 93 years at this point. It'll continue to in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead. Coming up next on the Mike New podcast, he wasn't in ESU, but a lot of the guys that ended up in ESU after the transit police merged with the NYPD, he helped train. And that's because he started the emergency medical rescue unit of the transit police all the way back in 1977. His name is Joe Said. He was a cop and sergeant in the unit, and he'll be on for a special edition of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. Tell me about that. He was in the unit from 77 all the way through his retirement in 1994. And right after that, should be an interesting show. He worked in Taru, was New York City EMS prior to coming on to the NYPD, finished up with Taru, and that's Howard Blank, who was also a detective in Brooklyn. So a couple of interesting NYPD shows on tap. In the meantime, on behalf of producer Vic and Tina Guerrero, this has been volume 34 of the E-Cops inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. We will see you next time. And as the E-Cops like to say, anytime, baby. Take care. See you Friday. Stay safe.